Welcome back to Reads of an Apple. My name is Stacy and I am here today to talk about all of the books I read in the month of May. So let's just jump into it. So I do have some graphics here to go over the stats that I keep track of. If you're interested in how I keep track of my books, I will link, I did a video at the beginning of the year of how I track my books, so I will pop that up there so you can watch that if you would like. But otherwise, let's just jump straight into the stats. So for the month of May, I read a total of 23 books for 5,593 pages. I averaged 1.04 days per book, so just over a day. My average page count was 243.17 pages. And then as for the page breakdown of the books I read, 5 of them were under 100 pages, 4 of them were in the 100s, 4 of them were in the 200s, 7 were in the 300s, 2 were in the 400s, and 1 was in the 500s. I ended up picking up 4 new authors, and 5 of these books were rereads. Now, 7 of the books I read this month were specifically picked up for clubs, readathons, or read-alongs. 2 of the books I read had diversity, so that's actually pretty bad. I was surprised I didn't do as well on that as I usually do, so I was a little disappointed in myself with that, but yeah, that was a little disappointing to see. 2 of the books I read this month were standalones, which is surprising because most everything I read is a part of a series in some way. 2 of these books were also recommended to me. As for how these books were, if I own them or not, 9 of these books I previously owned in paperback. 1 of them I had pre-ordered. I just didn't have the paperback yet when I read it. And then 8 of these books I added to my wish list. As for how I read them, 4 of these I read physically, 8 of these I read via ebook, 10 of these I read via audiobook, and I had 1 combo. So I listened to the audiobook while I read it physically. Okay, 18 of these books were indie published, and 5 of them were traditionally published. As for decades that they were published in, 1 of these was from the 2000s, 6 of them were from the 2010s, and 16 were from the 2020s. It is crazy seeing, especially this past year, how many new books I've been picking up lately compared to like previous reading years. And then the final stat on this specific page that I've been keeping track of is the ages of the main characters. So 3 of these were new adult books. 11 of these were characters in their 20s. 2 of these were characters in their 30s. And 7 of these were supernatural characters. So they're long-lived, even if they're 23. They could live to thousands, and those I just kind of put together in super. And then my next stat page is where these books were located when I read them. So 5 of them I physically owned. 1 of them I digitally owned. 1 of them was an ARC, an advanced reader copy. 6 of these books I read in KU, Kindle Unlimited. And 11 of these I checked out from Hoopla. Now that does seem weird because my Hoopla only allows me to check out 10 books a month. However, one of the books that I read had 4 books included in the 1 checkout. So technically I only used 8 of my 10 checkouts for the month. But it was 11 books that were in Hoopla. As for my ratings, my average rating for the month was 4.57. We had 13 5 stars, 6 4.5 stars, 1 4 star, 2 3.5 stars, and 1 2 star. And then the final thing we have to kind of talk about stats-wise is the genres I read in. I read 12 contemporaries, 2 fantasies, 1 historical, 2 paranormal, and 2 sci-fi, all of those romance. And then I read 4 urban fantasies with a strong romance plot line. And then as for the contemporaries, 3 of them were dark. 1 of them was dystopian. 1 of them was erotic. 5 of them were rom-coms, and 2 of them were sports romance. Now, most of those rom-coms I read were also small town, but I felt like the rom-com elements were more prominent, but they would work for both. But that's it. Those are the books I read. So let's just kind of get into it. So I started May, the novella-thon, which I did do a reading vlog for. I will pop that up above here. Ended like May 1st or May 2nd or something like that. So the first book I read in May was my final book for the novella-thon, and that was Releasing Maledect by Victoria Aveline. This is book 5.5 in her Cleclania series. I gave it 5 stars. I love this series. It was also actually just announced today that book 7 is coming out August 30th. I'm super excited. I'm a member of her Patreon, so I've seen some sneak peek character art that is just making me even more hyped for the next book in the series. So, I mean, like I said, I've vlogged for the novella-thon, so check out all my thoughts about it up there. But I'm just going to say 5 stars. I loved it. A perfect way to start out the month. Plus, I love her covers. They're so gorgeous. And the back of her covers are always super great too. There's a reason why I own them physically. Okay, then after that, I had a little bit of time before the Mafia Romance Readathon started. So I got in my reread of Resting Witch Face. This is a reread for me. I was rereading most of the series leading up to the release of the final book in the series. And I gave this 5 stars. Once again, I loved it. I totally forgot that this book started with Isadora and Davraj's wedding. I was like, oh, I forgot about that. Like, I remembered they got married, but I forgot that it was in this book specifically. So I love them. I loved Ruben and Jules, and it's still a 5 stars. I should also mention, if you have not seen already, Juliette Cross is doing a special edition hardback release of the Stay a Spell series on Kickstarter. It did go live June 1st and goes through the end of the month. So I will link that down below just for fun. If you are interested, definitely check it out. All of the covers and vellums and stuff that she has going on with that is absolutely gorgeous, just like the normal versions of these books. And it's definitely a pretty penny, but I think it's worth it. So just wanted to throw that out there. So after that, we had the Mafia Romance Readathon. Once again, I did a reading vlog for this, so I will link it up above. The first book I read for the Mafia Romance Readathon was The Hunt in Elusion. This is by M.L. Philpitt. This is the first book in her Fractured Ever After series. This is a Mafia fairy tale retelling series, and I gave this one 5 stars. This is Cinderella. I loved it, and I'm going to leave it at that because you should check out my vlog. Then I picked up the audiobook for Bloodied Hands by Adelaide Forrest. This is the first book in her Belandi Crime Syndicate series. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I had some issues with it, but I still enjoyed it. And I am intrigued to read more in this series, but once again, check out my vlog. Then, even though the Mafia Romance Readathon was going on, I wanted a different audiobook. So during the last couple days of that, I ended up picking up The One Night Stand Next Door by Emma Hart. This is the 0.5 prequel book in her Girl Next Door series. I gave this 5 stars. I think it was in May, it might have been in April. I read Emma Hart's Bookworm's Guide series, and the second heroine, so the heroine in the second book, Holly, her older sister, is Ivy, and there was a mention at one point in the book with Ivy's husband Kai that how silly it is that both sisters ended up in like a fake dating type situation. And I was like, wait a second. So then I had to go back and I found out that Ivy and Kai had a book, and so they were neighbors with surprise pregnancy that turns into fake dating. So this is the prequel novella where they sleep together. And I had fun. I had so much fun. I was laughing. This series, the Bookworms Guide, and the spin-off series, the Introvert's Guide, just tickle my brain in just the right way. These are the ones that I mentioned that are rom-com, but also small town romances. So they're just so fluffy and light, low angst, and the humor just hits right for me. And I love them. So I gave this prequel novella 5 stars. And then I immediately picked up the full-length book, and that is The Girl Next Door. So I also gave this 5 stars. It was just so great. I loved them. We kind of have mutual crushing, mutual pining. Like I mentioned, it is, they end up getting pregnant from their one-night stand, and then that kind of turns into a fake dating situation, which turns into a fake engagement situation, which it turns into, oh, we actually got married at City Hall, but that's fake too. And so it just like spirals out, but they're both doing it. Like, it starts out with Ivy saying that they're dating, and then Kai is actually the one who was like, oh no, we're engaged. So like they both escalate it, and I just loved it. It was so much fun. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave it at that. 5 stars. I had a lot of fun with it. Then I read my third and final book for the Mafia Romance Readathon. I was reading an ebook while I was listening to the other audios. And that is The Craving and Slumber, which is book 2 in the Fractured Ever After series by M.L. Philpitt. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This is the Sleeping Beauty one. I enjoyed this one, not quite as much as the first one, but I still really enjoyed it. And I definitely need to read the third book, which came out just after the Mafia Romance Readathon ended, and that one's the Beauty and Beast retelling, and I'm very excited for it. I haven't checked out on KU. I just haven't gotten to it yet. But like I said, check out my vlog to hear all my thoughts about that. Then I read The Ark just in time for release day for Grim and Barrett. This is the 6th and final book in the Stay as Spell series. And I don't want to go into it too much because it's still a fairly new release. I don't want to spoil it, but this is Henry and Clara's book. I gave it 5 stars. Oh, it's in the top running as favorite in the series. This book put me in a book hangover for almost a week, and I just loved every moment reading this book. It just was so beautiful, and a bittersweet ending, because the way that Juliette wraps up this series is just so heartwarming and slightly sad because the series is over. But it's not over because we can always go back and reread these books and go back into this world. But I just loved it. I loved it to pieces. If you haven't read Stay a Spell, I highly recommend it. Once again, check out the Kickstarter link down below. We still have not seen what the vellum art was going to be for this book. It hasn't been released yet, and I cannot wait to see it. But I felt like was a love letter to fans. It was a love letter to like readers, especially historical romance readers who also read this series. This book was just absolutely phenomenal and perfect for me. And as sad as I am about this series ending, I'm also excited to see what Juliette has coming next, because it is in a different subgenre, and I'm very excited. And you know what? I love that Juliette writes in all these different arenas, and as much as I'm sad to see this series go, I'm also very excited to see what she's doing next. So I'm just excited all around, right? It's Juliette. She's one of my favorite authors. So are we really surprised? Okay, then I picked up the audiobook for The Introvert's Guide. Like I mentioned, I was just in an Emma Hart mood, and these audiobooks just do it for me. So this is the first book in this series. Like I said, it's a spinoff for The Bookworm's Guide, and this is Tori and Colton's book. So Tori is the best friend of Ivy, which was partly why I immediately jumped into this one. It's because Ivy, like I mentioned, is the heroine from that little duology-ish series. And then the hero is Colton, who is the older brother of the heroine from the first book of the Bookworm's Guide series. I gave this 4.5 stars. It was fun. It was great. It didn't quite fit because it's the Introvert's Guide to Online Dating. There wasn't really too much with the online dating. There was a couple things where it didn't quite hit me just right with this series, but overall, I thought it was still super fun. I laughed my butt off. I enjoyed the antics throughout all of these series of the senior center and all of their grandparents being crazy with the ducks and the chickens, and it's a whole thing. And I loved it to pieces, so 4.5 stars for this one. Then it was the start of the hike-a-thon. I didn't do a dedicated vlog for this because it lasted 2 weeks, but the first book I picked up for this was Last Light by Claire Kent. This is a standalone. This is a recommendation from Jen at the Book Refuge. This is the dystopian contemporary. It is set in a post-apocalyptic modern-day world where an asteroid, I think, or a meteor or something like that hits Germany and basically causes all these seismic things to happen throughout the world, and it's life as we know it has pretty much come to end, because that causes like ash eruptions from Yellowstone for America, and it's like this whole thing. And so this is Lane and Travis, and Lane is stayed behind when her small town decided to try to make their way to one of the military forts, and she stayed behind to stay with her grandmother while her grandmother was dying, and her grandmother has since passed through from a lung issue because of the ash, and she's now headed to meet up with the rest of her small town, and she runs into Travis, who is the local mechanic, and he had stayed behind for his like 5-year-old daughter, I think, who was sick. And now she has also passed. So they decide to kind of team up because it's not very safe for women. And he feels like he can protect her. But she also ends up kind of helping him think of things to kind of help make their travels easier and I guess more comfortable. And it's them traveling and making their way through this post-apocalyptic world. And, you know, Jen talks about this being like a cozy series. I know she recently reread her full series that's also like dystopian apocalyptic, which I'm definitely intrigued in. And I get it. There's a lot of heavy things going on in the world in this series, but it did feel cozy at the same time. And I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It really is amazing. I've read Claire Kent before, and I never really jumped onto this series for some reason. And it's been on my TBR since Jen first read them, but I'm glad I got that little push to finally pick up this book because it was so great. And hopefully at some point I will get to the full series that's also post-apocalyptic. I don't know if it's associated with this book at all or if they're just too similar veined in setting, but we'll see. Then I picked up Phoenix Unbound by Grace Draven. This is the first book in her Fallen Empire series, and I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I thought the world building was really interesting. I thought the magic system was really interesting in this. However, I feel like we didn't quite learn as much as I would like to, especially when it comes to the magic. And I felt like at times the heroine kind of really stopped the emotional connection between the two characters from really developing as much as it could have. And then she made some choices at the end that didn't quite jive with me. I talked about this book quite a bit when I read it because there were some elements that bothered me during my weekly vlogs for this one. So definitely take a peek at my weekly vlogs if you'd like my more in-depth thoughts on this. But even though it didn't quite knock it out of the park for me. Grace Draven is still just a beautiful world builder and writer that I could not give it 4 stars, despite the romance not quite getting me where I needed it to be. So, I mean, it's Grace Draven, and this cover is gorgeous, and I love her books, and I love her writing style. So, it's still 4 stars, and I'm not sad at all that I have the physical copy. These are actually also some of her only traditionally published books, too. Then I picked up the book for the Innkeeper Chronicles read along that we are having, and that this month was, or May was, Sweep with Me, which is book 4.5 in the series. We are back with Dina and Sean, and even though this is a novella and it's super short, we hit all of the notes, all of the humor, all of the craziness. Everything that you could possibly want in an Innkeeper's Chronicle book still made its way in this short little novella. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Are we surprised? It's Ilona Andrews. I listened to the graphic audio of this while I read it. It was so good. I don't know what I'm going to do because the next book we have is book 5 and there's no graphic audio for it yet. I'm going to have to read a book in this series without the graphic audio, and I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. There is a normal audio, but the graphic audios are just so much more superior. But 5 stars. I loved it. It was great. I love that we're back with Dina and Sean. And who knows what's going to happen in book 5. That one is a chunker, but I just thought this was perfect. This is pretty much a holiday novella. It's one of the Innkeeper holidays, though, so it's not like a real holiday because it's kind of set in the beginning of January. But I would count this as a holiday novella, and it was just absolutely fantastic. Okay, then I picked up How to Lose at Love by Sara Nay. This is the first book in her new Campus Legends series, of which the second book was just recently released. This is new adult sports romance between Ryan and Dallas, and I give this 3.5 stars. I talked about this one a lot during the weekly vlog where I read this as well. I'm not sure if this just felt a little too cliche in a bad way, or if if I've just kind of outgrown my enjoyment of Sara Nay's writing when it comes to this kind of specific sphere. I still need to read her more adult series, but I enjoyed her Douchebag series and her Jock Rowe series, but those are a few years old at this point now, and even though I love them, this one just didn't quite do it for me. This was Ryan and Dallas is maybe the quarterback for this football team. I thought he was more offensive player, like a running, maybe not a running back, but like wide receiver type position. And then it ends up at the end of the book, he's the quarterback. So I don't know. That was one of the issues I had with it. But his teammate is dating Ryan and he's not feeling it. He wants to break up with her. He ends up paying Dallas to break up with her for him. And then they end up having this fake dating situation that obviously turns into real love. And I don't know. I just felt like there were quite a few things lacking in this book for me, for the romance, for the character development, and just who they were as characters. Because I feel like there was a lot of little mentions about, like, Dallas is super into Star Wars, or they're super into this thing. But then it's like this like throwaway line to like endear us to his nerdier side. But then it never comes up ever again. And we don't actually see him in a nerdy aspect outside of apparently he likes Star Wars and he has a Lego collection and like little things like that. But we don't actually see much of him interacting or being in that nerddom atmosphere, if that makes sense. Then it was on my radar already, but then I saw the Crow's Book Club was coming back and they were doing The Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Like I mentioned, I try to stay away from hype books where I can and let them die down and kind of balance out and see where people land on them. But this was already on my radar before it kind of was hyped. And then when the book club was going to do it, I was like, you know what? It took me a while, but I finally found a paperback copy at my local Walmart. So if you're still looking, check your local, like, grocery stores that have books, because they might still have them in stock. And I really enjoyed this. I can see the things that people have issues with this book, the questions they have about the world and the world building and just the situations going on. I understand some of the issues with the characters making unique choices or things kind of seemingly out of place. But honestly, even though I saw those same things, it didn't kill my enjoyment of this book at all. I had such a fun time. I am a dragon girly through and through. I always have been. And I gave this book 4.5 stars. It just did it for me. I loved it. I'm so happy I have the Fun Painted Edge copy, even though it's a hardback. I'm not a big hardback person, but I've been buying so many hardbacks lately because they're like special editions that are absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, I've already pre-ordered the second book since it might still be hard to find this book in copy, in a paperback or hardback copy and physical copy is what I'm trying to say. So I already pre-ordered the second book just so I can make sure that I am getting a copy around release date, and I'm excited to see what happens. This is the first book in her Imperium series. This is the first time I've read Rebecca Yarros, which it's fun. She is a Colorado author, which I didn't know. I've had some of her contemporary novels on my TBR for a while, her contemporary adult. I think they're mostly military romances, so I'm excited to see what else she has. But I am on the team of this was worth the hype, and I loved it, and I loved the dragons, and it just was so much fun for me, and I rate based off of enjoyment, so this just did it for me. Okay, then I picked up the novella Truth or Dare by Brianna Ocampo. Oh boy. And this book I ended up giving 2 stars. I talked about it in one of my weekly vlogs. The blurb for this book talks about how truth or dare situation, childhood best friends to lovers situation. This book is, let me break it down, 6 chapters. It is between Cassie and Santino. They have been best friends. They are with their college friends hanging out one night playing truth or dare. Santino dares Cassie to kiss the person that she's like in love with the most, or she wants to kiss the most, or something like that, and he expects her to kiss him, even though he doesn't want to go there, and he friend zoned her for the past 9 years. They are in their early 30s now, and so she decides to kiss the boy. I guess he's her boyfriend, but it's like their first date that she's there with, Christian, and it's not just a kiss. They get hot and heavy. It then turns into some kind of weird exhibitionist thing. And 4 out of the 6 chapters in this book are their night together. And it is all 3 of them. It is a threesome. If you are new to my channel and to my reading tastes, I don't care what gender you are. I just want 2 people. I am not into menage. I am not into poly. That is just not what floats my boat. And I kind of skimmed. I mean, I knew going in it was spicy. It was mostly going to be an erotic romance. But I honestly just didn't believe the HEA. I thought that the reasoning why him not, because she tries to kiss him when they're 21 and he kind of friend zoned her, and I thought his reasoning, it didn't quite work for me. And honestly, I don't believe in their HEA, because the only interactions that we have seen from them was basically this one really hot night with another dude. And this dude is matchmaking for them. And then apparently he's also some celebrity who they kind of thought they recognized but didn't recognize. And then it turned out he's some celebrity. But I just don't know if I believe their HEA with their joining together be a threesome that was orchestrated by a third party. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. After reading that, I will say, I thought it was well written. So I'm definitely interested in picking up this author's other books. But and I will say, there was also only 2 reviews on Amazon when I checked it out from KU. And neither of them mentioned that it was an MMF. So I was a little disappointed in those 2 reviewers, although I get there's only 2 reviews. But I did have to go, after I read it, I had to go through like 5 or 6 reviews before I saw it was mentioned on Goodreads that it was an MMF. But just put that in your blurb for me. I just needed, if I knew what it was going into it, I either wouldn't have picked it up or I would have been better prepared and might have been able to rate this higher. But I just did not. Like I mentioned, I rate on enjoyment, and I did not enjoy this book. And I felt bad giving it a 1 star, so I kept it at 2. So anyway, we will move on. The next audio book I picked up was The Introvert's Guide to Speed Dating, book 2 in The Introvert's Guide. This is London and Oliver. How this works in the rest of the other series, London is the cousin to Ivy, who, like I mentioned, I read previously this month, and who is the older sister of Holly, who's the heroine in book 2 of the Bookworm's Guide. So this is their cousin. She's a single mom. She's back in town. And she ends up being friendly with, and then eventually she kind of gets dragged into speed dating by Holly and her aunt, who's Holly and Ivy's parents. But they're doing speed dating at the local bar, which is Bronco's, and is owned by Holly and Ivy's parents. So she's kind of wrangled in to be an extra number on the women's side. And she has been kind of flirting with Oliver, who is a British person who's been brought in to teach soccer to the kids, at Sebastian, who is Holly's, I guess in this book they become fiance, but maybe they're still boyfriend and girlfriend, sports center thing. So he is teaching London's son in soccer, and they end up kind of running into each other during one of these speed dating events and being like, let's couple up and then we can escape. But they just both are super into each other, but they're very tentative about moving forward because she does have a kid, and he also isn't 100% sure if he's going to go back to London because he misses his family, or if he wants to still stay in the small town in Montana. I loved that the ex here, even though the ex cheated on London when they were still engaged before they could get married, there wasn't really bad blood between them. There was a little bit of dislike towards his girlfriend, who actually was the person he cheated on London with. But it wasn't because of what London thought about this person. It was because this person was very rude to their son. And their son actually brought up to London that, he overheard his dad's new girlfriend, saying these mean things about him. She was very obviously jealous of the time that the dad wanted to spend with the son. And she wanted it to be all about her. So she was kind of disparaging, made some cruel remarks about him spending time with his son and just about his son in general. And that was where London's main dislike for this new girlfriend came from, is that she didn't treat the son well. But she was very blunt about it. She was like, our son overheard her saying these things. He does not want to hang out with you if she is around in the picture. But they had a very matter-of-fact, cordial relationship. She was like, yeah, you can take our son to go to Florida to visit your house or to go do all these things. Yeah, take him for the weekend, no big deal. But he's got soccer practice, this basketball practice. Like, he does have his schedule of things he has to do. But yeah, otherwise, just make sure he gets to these things and you can have them all weekend. No big deal. And so I just loved the way that they were kind of co-parenting in the situation, and that they just were really what was best for the son. And there could have been drama with that other girlfriend, but It really wasn't there. It was more just like, our son doesn't like her because she obviously doesn't like him, and he'd rather not spend time with her. So, but she was open with it with the dad. And I mean, once again, 4.5 stars. I had a lot of fun with it. This was probably my favorite of the 3 books of this series. I had so much fun. I will mention, so after I read this one, I also picked up the final book in this trilogy. And this one and the final book are more of a clean romance. We get some kisses, but there is no full-on sex scenes in them. So just throwing that out there. The first book did have at least one scene, though. But like I mentioned, I picked up book 3 after this because why not just finish out the trilogy? And that is The Introvert's Guide to Blind Dating. And this is Piper's book. And Piper has recently moved back to town. Now, Piper is the little sister of Josh, who is the hero from the first book in the Bookworm's Guide, who is with Kinsley. And Kinsley's older brother, Colton, was the first book in this series. So we're all connected here, but she is a baker, and she gets set up by Holly for a blind date, and it ends up being a male romance author who is in town to kind of set up some signings with the bookstore. And what nobody knows is that Piper and Maverick actually had a one-night stand back when she was working and living in Vegas a while ago. And he just happened to be in the same town now. And so they get kind of forced on this blind date, but he is writing a new romance book with a baker heroine. And so he ends up paying Piper to kind of shadow her and have her teach him about like the baking world, and also to develop 3 specialty recipes that he can have his character make in this book and have the recipes in the back of the book situation. And so it's them hanging out all the time and having a romance, and I loved it. I also gave this one a 4.5 stars. This is probably my second favorite of the series, but obviously I gave all 3 books 4.5 stars. I enjoyed this series, and it was, I teared up a little bit at the end of this book because I wasn't sure if there was going to be another spin-off set in this same small town, but I'm thinking not, or if so, we're going to move on to other characters because this epilogue basically wrapped up all 3 series, and it made me a little sad. And it was set during Kinsley and Josh's wedding, which was the first book in the Bookworm's Guide, which was the first book I actually read in this whole universe, that small town universe that Emma Hart created. So it was great. I loved it, and it was super fun. I loved seeing a male romance author and who was writing like MF romance, and just the little things that he would talk about romance novels. Or, well, in my book, the hero would do this to the heroine now, and she'd be like, oh, really? And then he'd actually do it to her. And so there was like some cute parallels between the baker heroine and the hero in the book he was writing and what he was wanting to do with Piper. So it was super cute, and I loved it. Okay, then I picked up the graphic audio for Magic Bites, which is the first book in the Kate Daniels series by Ilona Andrews. This was a reread for me. 5 stars once again. This was so good. I've been so hyped that graphic audio is doing the Kate Daniels series, and hearing Kate's voice go, "Here, kitty, kitty," when she first meets Curran, was just everything I could ever want. I loved it. I was a little iffy on Curran's voice at first, I do have to say. But, you know, when she first meets him, he's trying to be like intimidating Beast Lord, and Kate's just this random merc. And she just said, "Here, kitty, kitty," to him. And so, but once we kind of got into his more normal tone for Curran, I was like, okay, I'm digging it. So I was at first just like, but I loved it. I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. If you haven't read Kate Daniels, now is the time. Read it with the graphic audios and join the BDH, the Book Devouring Horde, which is Ilona Andrews fan club, because it is just so good. And now a lot of people say the first couple books aren't very good, but if you haven't read Ilona Andrews yet, I feel like you're still going to go into these like myself. I did read a couple Ilona Andrews before I did the Kate Daniels read along, but because I hadn't read like any of the Kate Daniels books, the first couple books to me were still really good. It's just by the time we get to the last few books in this series, it is astounding. But this was super great. I loved it. Now, this is, like I mentioned way back in the beginning, the 4 books in one. So with the graphic audio, not only do we get Magic Bites, but we get the 2 Curran point of view novellas, short stories, whatever you want to call. So one is Unicorn Lane, which is the Here Kitty Kitty scene, but from Curran's point of view. All of this book and all of the main Kate Daniels books are from Kate's POV for the most part. But we do get these Curran POV short stories thrown in. So in the graphic audio, they are including them in where they fit. So we had the Unicorn Lane, and then we also had Fernando's. I bumped up my ratings on these from 4 stars to 5 stars because hearing them in the graphic audio just made it so much better. It was also fun having read the series, going back and rereading it and being like, Curran, are you sure you want to think this about Kate? You are soon going to almost die for her. Like, are you really gonna be sassing her right now? I don't know. It was just so much fun to reread them. And then it also included the prequel novella, A Questionable Client, which is the 0.5 prequel where we see Kate meet Simon. And this is 0.5 in this series. The current POVs and A Questionable Client are all included in Small Magics. This is a collection of a lot of their novellas and short stories. And it was so great to hear it in the graphic audio. And the second book is already out. It's not on Hoopla yet, but as soon as it drops on Hoopla, I will be fitting it into my reading schedule where I can. But yeah, so 5 stars for all 4 of those. Then I picked up the new release from Rebecca Genshak, Scoring the Player. This is the 3rd book in her Campus Wallflower series. This is Dahlia and Felix's book. So Dahlia is the 3rd of the 4 roommates, and Felix is the older brother for the 2 twin sisters. That is her Holiday with the Players duet that came out at the end of 2022. He's their older brother. So it is his relationship with Dahlia. We've got kind of mutual pining into fake dating, into something real. I love this book. I feel like where I mentioned with the Serenade one, where some of the tropes and situations that happened kind of felt, I just lost the word, stereotypical. This has the same thing. We get some stereotypical tropes, and just kind of situations that happened. But the way that Rebecca writes it just feels more cozy and nostalgic to me. And I absolutely loved it. Dahlia is also a golfer, so it's double sports. He's the quarterback of the team, and I just love them together. Their impetus of kind of fake dating is Dahlia is recorded while she's talking with Jane in line to the bathroom at a party about how hot she finds Felix and how she wants to lick his torso and climb him like a tree. It goes viral throughout the campus, and then they end up deciding to fake date just to kind of help the rumors and the craziness die down. And Dahlia is incredibly introverted and incredibly shy. So the last thing she wants to do is become like a viral person. And I gave it 4.5 stars and I loved it. Okay, the final book I read was Finding Miss McFarland. I finally got to my historical of the month. This is the 3rd and final book in Vivian Lorette's debut series, The Wallflower Weddings. This is Delaney's book, and she has an incident on her debut in the ton where she ends up kind of through happenstance throwing up on Griffin's shoes, and this is the next season. It's over a year later. She's been doing her best to avoid him at all social events, and they finally end up bumping into each other, and they can't stay away, and they're finding themselves drawn to each other. And even though Delaney's trying to avoid him, Griffin is now taking the effort to make sure that he's there when she expects him not to be. Delaney is an heiress, and she really wants to just have a marriage of convenience from the start. She's trying to find a husband that she can be like, I'll give you half my dowry. You can have your house whatever you want. You can have your dalliances. Just try to keep them discreet. And I'm going to take my half of the money, and I'm going to support this learning house, dormitory, orphanage type situation for young boys who have physical ailments, like they're missing limbs or blindness and things like that, and just kind of live my life how I want to live my life. I gave it 5 stars. It's probably my least favorite of the 3 books, but if I were like super much a stickler, I'd give it like 4.75, but I still loved it and gave it 5 stars. And I have officially finished her debut series, and I'm excited to continue my reread and first time reads through the remainder of Vivienne Lorette's backlist. So I love her to pieces. I do plan on doing a guide to Vivienne Lorette once I get through the books I have left to read on her backlist. So I'm going to leave it at that. I know I didn't talk about some of them very long, but it's still like 45 minutes long. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to leave me a comment down below, let me know what your favorite read of the month was. I definitely had a lot of good books that I picked up this month. If you'd like to just leave me an emoji instead, leave me a flower in honor of my final book of the month. But otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you all soon with another video.